the Latin term memento mori, which means that you should always remember that whatever action you take, that you should make peace with death. And this is kind of the underlying theme of Doctor Strange. However, Doctor Strange has a lot of, I guess you could call them very, very frank and candid moments of esoterica and what people call black magic or Illuminism or Luciferianism. Whether it is in the process of enacting upon good or participating in conjuring evil, death is always something that we need to bear in mind as a cautionary practice, that all we do contributes in some way to our demise. All we do contributes in some way to someone else's demise. All we do contributes to the whole, like dominoes falling in a timeline. And these ideas of rituals and these ideas of apotheosis, meaning that you become like a god, which was, something I thought was interesting. It's the idea that, Doctor Strange has to come to grips with the idea that he's mortal before he ever gets a chance to heal from what has happened to him in a car accident. But when you're thinking of rituals and mortality and everything coming to its own with Christianity, whose strong emphasis on divine judgment, heaven, hell, and the salvation of the soul brings death to the forefront of consciousness. People worry about whether or not they're going to go to heaven or hell and not worrying about whether or not they're living in this life now. And I know there's saving rituals such as baptism and communion. That's for the salvation with God. But Luciferian ambition is to wield supreme power over everything, seize power, and then become a god. An apotheosis, if you will, of man. The proof of this ambition is found in a lot of the old grimoires and magical textbooks, which, by the way, there are plenty of them in Doctor Strange. And it instructs the reader and the initiate on how to call up or conjure spirits in order to do their bidding for you. A lot of ritualism, and a lot of ritualism that, of course, I know the elite practice. Does it surprise you at all that there was this soul cooking thing that the Podestas were invited to? Now, they didn't RSVP. They didn't show up. But yet Marina Abramovic was doing something similar to the Cakes of Light ritual with the soul cooking. And it's certainly I guess you could call it a satanic type of, it's a Luciferian satanic type of ritual that, a lot of elite, a lot of well-known Hollywood and a lot of well-known elitists go to and pretend to be part of this wonderful little satanic gathering, which, we talked about the satanic mechanics before and what it means. And I think that people shy away from it, thinking that maybe I want you to convert. I don't want you to convert. I just want you to have an idea of what's happening. So I was very excited to hear that Jay Dyer has the same enthusiasm about this movie as I do, to try and talk about what is going on with the revelation of the method, so to speak. Jay's Analysis is a great website, jaysanalysis.com, and it's grown to become one of the premier film and philosophy sites on the internet, showcasing the talents of my guest tonight, whose graduate work focused on the interplay of film, geopolitics, espionage, and psychological warfare. Jay is a public speaker, lecturer, comedian, and author of the popular title Esoteric Hollywood, Sex, Cults, and Symbols in Film, as well as the host of Jay's Analysis podcast, Esoteric Hollywood. Jay is also a regular contributor to 21st Century Wire, one of my favorite places to go and read. He also he's a contributor to Soul of the East, to Espionage History Archive, all kinds of great subjects from satire to metaphysics, film analysis, theology, geopolitics. He's a guy to talk to if you want to pick someone's brain on Dr. Strange. Jay Dyer, welcome to Ground Zero.
Thanks, Clyde. Always a pleasure to be here.
So you saw it, I saw it, we both saw it, and we both agree. Isn't this probably the most frank and candid revelation of the method you've ever seen in film?
It is, and I'm tired of the bounced around term Illuminati so often on the internet, and so I don't often use it, but there was a couple films where I have used it, and this is the most recent one. I think I last used it when I did an analysis of Zardoz, that goofy, bizarre Masonic movie with Sean Connery from the 70s by John Borston.
That's the floating head. That was the floating head movie. I remember that movie. Yeah.
And him in his undies.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Exactly right.
Well, this is, like you said, I didn't read your analysis. I wrote my analysis and I wanted to check on it when I finished mine. And I think we came to about 80% of the same conclusions on the film. Mm-hmm. So you're spot on that this is total revelation of the method. It is an illuminist film. And by that, I would say that it really encapsulates the, I guess you could say, what I would call perennialism. I note in my analysis that there's a famous book that Aldous Huxley wrote called The Perennial Philosophy. And what he does in that book is give this alternate perspective on comparative religion. And in this view, religions are all kind of the same at base. They kind of have a skeletal outline behind them. But there's a higher sort of traditional, quote unquote, religion that is the primal version of it. And it's in that primal tradition. So this philosophy goes that all of the other traditions of man throughout history that, they therefore spawn from.
Are you referring to the archons and the demiurge? Because I did a show a while ago about the demigorgon being the demiurge, and I'm thinking the basics. When we're looking at Doctor Strange, he receives gnosis after his car accident, and I'm thinking it's that basic stuff that, of course, all religions have spun from.
Well, it would be, Gnosticism would be a part of that tradition, but they would probably link it back even further into ancient Hindu cosmology, interestingly. So that's actually what comes up in this film, because when you see Doctor Strange kind of have his total trip out when his third eye is opened and he goes into other realms and other worlds, this is all part of Hindu cosmology. Right. And I don't think that it's accidental that, Crowley and these different characters, Madame Blavatsky, they talk about these ascended masters, and that's all that sort of primal, ancient Hindu philosophy.
Why is it always condemned? The Far Eastern philosophies are condemned, and yet we embrace them in movies like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and now this film, which, of course, we know that Tolkien was Catholic, and I don't think very many people know this, but the guy who did this film is a devout Christian.
Mm-hmm. Well, I say that it's pretty complex because the history of religions is all over the place. But I think if you look at the history of the ecumenical movement, the reason why it's popular in the West is that about 100 years ago, big families started funding the idea of the importation of Far Eastern philosophies. Now, I'm not saying that means, therefore, that everything in Far Eastern philosophies is false or incorrect. But I think that what they wanted to do was utilize it as a tool to socially engineer. And this is where you get the rise of the ecumenical movement. And it is actually from the Rockefellers. So I think they had an agenda. And you can find, Krishnamurti and these different characters who were big players in that. What they wanted to do was alter the religious perspective of the West as a whole. Mm-hmm. So that's why it pops up in movies, is because it's kind of palatable. It's teens and girls are all doing yoga and stuff like that. But it's all divorced, of course, from the philosophic and religious meanings behind it. So, but what's interesting is that is the initiatory path that Doctor Strange takes in the film. And this is all explicit. It's not our interpretation of this film. No, he's actually joining a secret order. He's actually, taking these courses, so to speak, exactly, from ascended masters, more or less, and, learning everything from Western Hermeticism to Far Eastern Hermeticism.
Well, see, I get the feeling that Hermeticism and Illuminism and Luciferianism are basically, I've always wondered where the halfway point of God and religion and science is going to be, whether or not we have the aliens be a part of that or whether or not we have something else be a part of that. But this, I believe, is that halfway point that we have been looking for, where Illuminism and Hermeticism are going to be mixed together with science to create a whole new religious philosophy that's based on, a number of things, gnosis and other further esoteric leanings. What do you say to that?
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. And that's why what I'm calling perennialism is the very philosophy that Huxley was a big proponent of. Now, obviously not everybody in the perennial tradition is the same or has the same views, but Huxley, of course, being at the UN and his, coining the term transhumanism with Julian Huxley, this is all a religious philosophy. And what they do is they reintegrate science back into its, like you said, religious sense. So we've been told in the West since the Enlightenment that science is opposed to religion or faith. These are two dialectical tensions, between faith and science and reason and analytical thought. And that's actually what Strange goes through in his journey, right? Yes. He's a Western trained medical man. He's on the cutting edge of neurosurgery and experimental techniques. And when he has his tragic accident, he's then forced into seeking other methods of healing.
He has to learn, once again, as Yoda says, he has to unlearn what he has learned. Again, Eastern philosophies in Star Wars, Eastern philosophies in The Lord of the Rings, all these things that are written and produced and that Christians are swallowing up, but they don't understand why they're embracing it. They're embracing it because this is the ancient ideas and the Illuminism and the esoteric Hermeticism that is lacking. And I think people are wanting to jump out of their rigidness and find more and realize more. And that's why movies like Doctor Strange, I think, strike fear in the hearts of the clergy because of what it says. 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. We'll be back with more Ground Zero. And Jay Dyer with us tonight. Right here on Ground Zero. We'll be back.
FM News 101 KXL.
Back to Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis on FM News 101.
Jay Dyer is with us tonight on Ground Zero, Esoteric Hollywood. So glad to have him on the show talking about Doctor Strange. I couldn't help but think to myself as I was watching the show, once again, we say it's the revelation of the method, and quite rightly so. I've always felt, and after reading H.G. Wells and, of course, Aldous Huxley, and, of course, Doors of Perception was being read by Stan Lee in the movie, after reading all that, I realized that the goal of this whole idea of the ecumenical church is to create a hermetically approved religion where the apotheosis of man is what is at the forefront, and there is no externalized savior, that mankind is his own savior. Did you get that from the theme of the film at all, with that idea?
Yeah, and that's exactly why Stan Lee is reading Huxley. And I think that's a clue to not just Doors of Perception, but again, like I said, the other Huxley books like Perennial Philosophy, which is promoting that very religion that you're talking about. I mean, this is the backbone of the ecumenical movement. Now, to be fair to the perennial tradition, there are different schools amongst them. So, for example, if you were to read the character Rene Guénon, he has a famous book about the Antichrist and the spirit of Antichrist and how this corresponds to materialism, or to use the Hindu cosmology again, Kali Yuga. And so he would say our era is actually Kali Yuga, whereas Huxley, the other side, the other branch of this Illuminism, you might say, would disagree. He would say, no, we're entering into this great period now where the UN's going to run everything. There's going to be one civic approved religion, which is in Brave New World, by the way. If you remember the chapter in Brave New World, there's a Masonic sort of Illuminist approved civic hermetic religion. And it's just basically there to mind control people. It's not a real authentic thing. But Guénon would disagree. He would say, no, we're actually entering into a dark period. This period that we're in is not Illumination. It's Kali Yuga.
It's interesting that in the Matrix, we all said, why have secrets about MK Ultra when you can put them in a movie and use a lot of Alice in Wonderland trigger phrases to get people to be programmed? What I thought was interesting is when his third eye was open, Dr. Strange flies through the air, ends up in some clouds above the planet, and just for a moment, he stops, and you see a monarch butterfly go by. And I thought to myself, Isn't this obvious? This is the most obvious thing ever. The idea of the changeling, the idea of changing from one capacity to another, going from cocoon to chrysalis and then to monarch butterfly.
I think one of the most powerful presentations of that in terms of film was, if you remember, Butterfly Effect. And this is kind of a cheesy movie with Ashton Kutcher on its surface, but if you review the film knowing all this stuff, you'll actually see that it's precisely what you're talking about. The film is about persons being dissociating, having alters and splitting in that mind control, satanic ritual abuse kind of sense, based on the fact that, if you remember the plot, he is abused as a child. Mm-hmm. And this is why he's having these dissociative states and these fugue states and so forth. And so you're absolutely right that it was not accidental that the butterfly was there right when because he's transforming, right? His mind is being opened. Right. He's seeing these other worlds and spiritual realms and dimensions.
And it took trauma for him to do this. And so that, in my opinion, frightens me, because if you take this and you put it on the esoteric revelation of the method and say, this Dr. Strange represents our country, Dr. Strange represents our collective mindset, then there has to be a trauma worse than 9/11 that will come to us, that will bring us gnosis, and eventually we would disregard all of our old ways and try to find new ways to accept more esoteric knowledge. Wouldn't you think that would be kind of a metaphor for America?
Absolutely. In fact, when Rene Guénon wrote his book, Reign of Quantity, he's criticizing the West as basically falling into this rank sort of materialism and no longer, understanding that there are spiritual planes and spiritual worlds.
Right.
And so when he says that, he's intending to, when the film is presenting Strange as the culminate, sort of the apex of Western medicine and science.
Right.
Strange even says to Tilda Swinton's character, he says, I don't believe in any of this crap. I am a straight up materialist. You can't tell me any of this is true. And that's when she bops the crap out of him.
Right. And it's all traumatizing. He traumatized him into becoming a new man, and to learn that it's up to him, the apotheosis of mankind, making them the new man, the hermetic man, the one who does not believe in an external savior. He believes that God is around him and that he can be like God. Much of what was said, the wisdom of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, at least, quote, wisdom, end quote, of the serpent in the Garden of Eden. More to come from Jay Dyer tonight on Ground Zero. The Revelation Method is in. It's called Dr. Strange in theaters. It's remarkable. We'll be back. This hour of the Ground Zero podcast is sponsored by Life Change Tea, herbal tea that tastes great, helps you lose weight and feel better. Go to getthetea.com.
More with Clyde Lewis and Ground Zero on FM News 101. In the beginning, three were created. Man, made of clay. Angels, made of light. And a third, made of fire.
Is there at this very moment a global secret brotherhood plotting to control the world? Or even worse, is the shocking plan already in motion?
People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. Women seem wicked when you're unwanted. Streets are uneven when you're down.
Harness energy and shape reality. We travel great distances in an instant.
I get this here there.
How did you become a doctor?
Study and practice years ago.
You're listening to Ground Zero. The number's call tonight, 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. Tonight on the program, Jay Dyer talking about Dr. Strange. Well, this is spoiler-free. I did say earlier that on a show that was previously broadcast, we talked about memento mori. We talked about no matter what you do, you'll always end up dying. And one of the things that's interesting about Dr. Strange is they deal with two things. One is the apotheosis of Dr. Strange, or the apotheosis of man, the hermetic structures of man becoming like God, or even a God himself. But see, the idea that we are very much concerned as Christians on the emphasis of divine judgment, heaven, hell, and the salvation of the soul, Luciferianism and the ambition of Luciferianism and Illuminism is to wield supreme power over everything, seize power, and become a god. Now, the proof of this ambition is found in a lot of the old grimoires or the magical textbooks like we see in the film, which instruct the initiate or the reader on how to call up or conjure spirits, how to use the darker powers to kill people, getting people to submit to your wishes, and creating the climate for destruction, creating the climate for helps. But, you can say that, all this is all satanic in nature, or they're how-to books on how to do satanic rituals. But there are sections that also include prayers to God for victory in war, prayers for political supremacy, calling upon angelic intervention in battles, fasting rituals, conjuring up famine, self-mortification to gain favor from others. All kinds of rituals are in these grimoires. In fact, a while ago I brought up the grimoire of Pope Honorius, which is, of course, the 8th century bishop of Rome, the Pope, and talking about how he gave the sanction of the papal office to the practice of ritual magic, saying that priests not only can conjure demons, but they can make them appear as well. And so I keep thinking of all these grimoires that Dr. Stephen Strange was looking through, Jay Dyer, my guest tonight on Ground Zero. And I would say that there's a lot of things, not only Huxley, but of course there's the grimoire of Pope Honorius, if you're familiar with that text, where the idea that a true powerful, I guess, sorcerer or whatever is illuminated to the effect where he can not only cast out demons, but he can conjure them and gather them at will.
Well, what I was going to say right when the break happened was that it's interesting that he is called the Sorcerer Supreme, and he ends up taking on that role and, being the head guy in the London branch of the secret society. Hint, hint.
Yeah, and, it's weird how they picked London, that he was going to... Well, I thought maybe he took residence in New York. Well, first he tried to save the London branch, but the scary part about that...
Was he in New York? I can't remember.
I think he was the guy that took over New York, but then he was at the London branch when it was being destroyed.
Oh, okay.
And that's where he accidentally found out his power, when he was in the London branch. But as you say in your article, which I think is amazing, that you say that London is ground zero for Satanism, Illuminati... Masonry and also Islam, which is kind of interesting.
Well, that's because of the British Empire, right? The British Empire, which the America kind of took on the role of being the new imperial master. The old world empire was run out of London. So there's still the skeletal remains of all those networks, of course, World Freemasonry, right? Headquartered in England. So what I wanted to say, though, was that this whole idea of him being the Sorcerer Supreme, this is actually kind of argued about amongst sorcerers, right? Crowley or Michael Aquino, where they've talked about who's going to be the magus of the new age and so forth. And Crowley thought that he was with speaking the word of the new aeon, the new age. And that ties in perfectly with the entire universe that Marvel has been laying out for the last several years in these reboots and in these new installments. So Doctor Strange, of course, as you know, is part of that whole Marvel universe with the crystals and the whole mythology of Loki and all that, as I know you've done shows on all that. But, all those other installments back all this up, as including everything from MK Ultra to transhumanism with Vision and the Avengers. And, every one of these elements is there, including the notion of tapping into the ether, right? That's the whole point of the cube that they're after in the Avengers, is this higher level physics, this higher level technology that will give that apotheosis power, or so they think. And so I think that this is interesting. This installment is interesting because it's taking all that same mythology and it ties into that, and it's saying, here's the spiritual dimensions behind what we were telling you in a more exoteric way in, Age of Ultron.
I was curious and I sat through the whole movie thinking to myself that Doctor Strange is a metaphor for the Antichrist. Would you agree?
He does seem to be that, because the god Dormammu that they take on seems to be Jehovah-like. He seems to be Saturn affiliated. His minions, the character played by Mads Mikkelsen, Caecilius, he preaches immortality and monotheism. And that's the dark side in the film, right? There's an association with him having power over time. And that's why, of course, to give a spoiler alert here, that's why Strange defeats him through trapping him in a time loop.
Well, and I was watching that, and I was trying to figure out how that worked. And it was very interesting how he called upon the Mobius strip in order to create a power trip for this Jehovah-like God, which was going crazy because he couldn't have power over Doctor Strange. And once again, we once again developed this idea that the foundation of Illuminism is to create a religion or create an organization so strong and so powerful that none dare question its power. None dare question its ability to unite the world in one ecumenical brotherhood with the idea of the laws of nature. They kept talking about the laws of nature in the film, and that's where I go to the idea that, and I've always said this, that this whole idea of climate change, this whole idea of the environmental boogeyman, this whole idea of the green design, global sustainability push for the summits in 2030 and the changes of the world. The natural order of climate change, or the natural order of global sustainability, will be the foundation of the new ecumenical religion. And that will be part of the science we'll move into. Nature is God. God is nature, but there is no external savior to save you. Only yourself can save you, which is the esoteric hermetic nature of the word, of the revelation of the method, of the Illuminism.
This is why the new atheists play an important role as evangelists for the exoteric religion of atheism, materialism, Darwinism. And that's obviously, of course, tied into the climate aspects of everything that you're talking about, the green agenda. That's later to be transitioned into the Luciferian thing that you're talking about.
Right. Again, I don't think people understand that, once again, the grooming process is had in a lot of films. The Matrix is one of the biggest ones of all. And you know, going back and looking at some of the, I guess you'd call them the esoteric nods that exist. I mean, I saw the ad campaign for Doctor Strange. If you look at you have the Doctor, and of course Benedict Cumberbatch is Doctor Strange, and on a poster he has his hand over his right eye, forming the same hand gestures as Baphomet. And he also reveals his left eye, or sinister eye, in the movie poster. And that whole point there is Doctor Strange is that after his close brush with death, he illuminates himself by using black magic, or the left-hand path, or the left of the left, which I find interesting. Was there any other symbols that you saw that were kind of out there and were right there in your face?
Well, to make this a little more meta, you can also, as I pointed out in a lot of my analyses, look at the other roles that actors have played as kind of tying into a long-term alchemical path that they might be going down in their career, right? So Benedict Cumberbatch has played the character Sherlock Holmes in the popular BBC series. And if you watch that series, there's all kinds of predictive programming elements in it. I've written about it at my site. But you'll also notice that he begins as this very hardened materialist in that show, and then gradually opens himself up to the possibility of similar ideas, other worlds, of alchemy, of spiritual aspects to things. And that's very subtle in the show, but as you watch it, you start to see that.
Well, and I believe that what we're looking here, I mean, when Doctor Strange was in the comics, it was a time, it was 1963, about that time, and it was in that time in American counterculture that people were holding seances, they were playing with Ouija boards, they dabbled in forms of spirituality outside the Judeo-Christian establishment. And so it kind of sticks to that idea, and it shows us the secret powers of the Eastern mysticism, the psychedelic trips, alternate realities, even though, you know, the ancient one said that she just gave him tea. Obviously, he went on an LSD trip in the film, which, of course, he did a lot of that LSD stuff in the comic books, or the I wouldn't say directly LSD trips, but something that would be a natural parallel for the mind to draw the esoteric into LSD trips and occult theorem and the connection between evil and things that are reversed. I mean, it's not mere symbolism, but it's part of the idea that, you know, he had to invert some of the normal things in order to gain power. And once again, back to Yoda when he was in Star Wars, you must unlearn what you have learned. You must go backwards. You have to create the upside down. You have to not only have the right side up crucifix, but you need to know of the meaning of the inverted crucifix. Or not only do you say the Lord's Prayer forward, but you need to know the Lord's Prayer backward, because it's linked with evil and the devil, because they have reversed the proper order of things, and the devil is the arch rebel who seeks to overturn and basically overturn the establishment. In order to understand God, you must know your duality. And that's what Star Wars tried to teach us with Darth Vader and Anakin, was that in order for the order to have balance, there must be a revelation of what duality is. So there needs to be balance in the Force, just like there needs to be balance between, in the film, he talks with Thor. There needs to be a balance between the gods and the sorcerers.
Yeah, it reminds me of the idea in Tibetan Buddhism that that you can also take the dark path, that you immerse yourself in all degradation and evil, and this is supposed to give you a higher form of enlightenment than if you had only known the good. And of course, isn't that strangely reminiscent of what Lucifer says, or Satan says, depending on how you read Genesis in the garden? He says, God doesn't want you to have the knowledge of good and evil. So I think that you can draw all kinds of aspects out of this film, like you're talking about.
It's amazing. Yeah. Jay Dyer with us tonight on Ground Zero. 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. Doctor Strange is in theaters, and man, it's going to spark a lot of conversation after you're finished. I mean, you get the popcorn, you get the candy, you get the chewing gum, and everything's cool, but by the end of the night, you're going to be talking about esoteric, ecumenical, what would you call it? Hermeticist. Just go down the list of everything you're going to be talking about. Hermetic Arcanum. 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. We'll be back.
FM News 101 KXL. More with Clyde Lewis on FM News 101.
I'm Clyde Lewis. You're listening to Ground Zero. 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. Jay Dyer's with us tonight talking about Doctor Strange without giving away too many spoilers. It's a great film that's in theaters right now. You know, do you find it ironic that the director is a devout Christian? I mean, and all of these Eastern philosophical movies that come out are usually produced by Christians. So what we have is, like, for example, Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and now this film, basically weaving magic into the realms of what would be called, Christianity disguised with esoteric, with esoteric trappings.
Well, I think that it all depends on what you mean by magic. I mean, the word often has the connotation of invoking demons, but, like Arthur Clarke's third law says, it also could refer to advanced technology. So, in my opinion, the highest levels of Illuminism are not so concerned with the possibility of controlling spirits. They're more interested in pragmatic attainment of goals and power, and that's why they are transhumanists. So for them, spirit and technology meet precisely in the philosophy of transhumanism, and so they're much more concerned with what works over theories and speculations about, whether or not you can control this or that demon or something like that. So that's the real Illuminism. That's the real danger and threat. Not downplaying the demonic. Obviously, we look at these Podesta and the Marina Abramovich situation and the invitation that you mentioned. Yeah. And, that looks to be real. It looks like my first thought was the Gnostic Catholic Church Cakes of Light, like, the Crowley situation. Yeah. Which I think is a lighter version to bring people into darker and darker things.
Well, the Cakes of Light are nothing compared to, having a dinner where they're pouring menstrual blood everywhere. I saw that and it turned my stomach. And I know, and I'm going to say it again because so many people think that I'm twisting this to say this is all a Hillary Clinton thing. Podesta and his brother, as far as I know, did not go to this soul cooking or they didn't go to it. But what it basically illustrates is what I've been trying to show for the past 2 or 3 shows, and that is this type of, I guess you could call it, bizarre ritualism is being done. And and you talk about the Cakes of Light. The Cakes of Light are nothing. In fact, they're smaller to this. It's like going to a cookie and tea social as opposed to going to this dinner where spit and sperm and all that crap is being used and finger cutting and all this other crap. I mean, it's good old fashioned Satanism is what that is.
Well, the real ritual is referenced in the film when Doctor Strange basically wants the earth cleansed of anybody who would adhere to what they call in the film the dark side or the demiurge, right? And so essentially you're talking about the last time I was on, we were talking about me magic and the CFR and depopulation. And that is the highest, goal of the Illuminists, is basically a giant sacrifice to get rid of a large portion of the planet.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and it seems to be the goal. Anyway, it's Jay Dyer with us tonight on Ground Zero. 888-673-3700. It's 888-673-3700. We have a few lines open, so if you want to get in now, you can. If you want to talk about esoteric Hollywood or the mission of Hollywood and the mission of shows like Doctor Strange, if you think this is a danger to us all, and this type of philosophy is going to put us in a lot of hot water, I would say that we need to see it just so we know what the revelation of the method is and what is to come. As we've said earlier, it is pretty much a metaphor for the Antichrist and how the Antichrist would do his business, which I find fascinating. Put in comic book form, the Antichrist appears on the screen and people don't recognize him. 888-673-3700. We'll be back with more Ground Zero. Don't go away.
FM News 101 KXL.
Hi, folks. In a world of GMO, genetically modified organisms, that is, chemicals, processed foods, and a healthcare system that's unraveling like a cheap suit, it's time to prepare. God created herbs, and herbs help man. Our body can heal itself, just sometimes we need assistance. You need some help? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Our mild detox is quite powerful with its unique blend of 8 different herbs. And if you're looking for more, our non-GMO supplements will help you with different needs you might have. Health should be a top priority. Take care of your health naturally. Log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Give your body a treat. Let the herbs do their thing naturally. Read all the testimonies on the website, GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Sickness and viruses are like intruders, and herbs are like warriors. Let the tea work for you. That's GetTheTea.com.
Let me be clear. As a citizen and as president, Ground Zero is indeed essential on radio and is essential to who we are.
The loudspeaker spoke up and said, "Wait, Jimmy." The loudspeaker spoke up and said, "Wait, Jimmy." The loudspeaker spoke up and said, "Wait, Jimmy." Give up. Give up. Give up. Give up. Give up. Wait, Jimmy. Wait, Jimmy. Wait, Jimmy.
I'm Clyde Lewis, and this is Ground Zero. The numbers to call tonight, 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. Jay Dyer's my guest tonight on Ground Zero, talking about the excellent film that's in theaters right now, Doctor Strange. I'm sorry, I'm being, hold on a second. I'm being distracted from a CNN live report. Lady Gaga is speaking at some rally, and she's dressed like a Nazi. Now, are my eyes deceiving me, or is she in what looks like a Nazi fascist uniform at a Democratic gathering? What is this? Oh my gosh, this is bad image. Somebody snap a picture of this on screen, will you, for me, so we can put it on Facebook? Someone get CNN. I mean, this is amazing. I can't, I'm looking at, well, okay. Just so you know, I'm being distracted right now by Dixville Notch. Is that what this is? And Lady Gaga standing there in what appears to be a Nazi uniform, and everybody's applauding. She's got a red armband and she's wearing all black. So I don't know what she thinks she's doing. I don't know. I mean, it kind of goes with what we're saying here tonight. It just, what is going on? They're throwing it right in our faces from the whole idea of this ritualism that we were talking about earlier, the emails and the idea of the soul cooking or that thing. To now, we're looking up and I'm seeing Lady Gaga at a gathering. It is Lady Gaga. And it says Stronger Together. She's in a black outfit that looks fascist with a red band around her arm. And I don't know if anybody understands. I mean, she looks like an Aryan. Oh my God. It's just insane. Why are they putting her on TV like this? I don't get it. Anyway, tonight, Jay Dyer is with us on Ground Zero. As we all know, Doctor Strange is in theaters right now. And it's really interesting because of how it has all the trappings of what would be called the priestcraft of the day and the darker forces that drive the hunger for power. And the hunger for power is the driving force behind the tenets of Luciferian ideology. Its priesthood is black magic. Its ultimate aim was stated appropriately enough by the reptilian serpent in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve were afraid that if they ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that they would die. But the serpent said, "Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes will be open, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." And from trauma, that you can do better and learn the ways of the darkness, then you can become you can become a better person by finding the apotheosis of man, and that happens in Doctor Strange. It's a strange way of initiating us into the realms of Illuminism. But as my guest Jay Dyer said, he doesn't use the word Illuminati very much because it's kind of a catch-all term. But we certainly do see what could be called the mission, or at least the foundation of the Illuminati in this film, right, Jay?
Absolutely. I think last time, I was on, we were talking about meme magic, and that's all about the manipulation of signs and symbols, or in philosophy, semiotics. And this film is filled with the semiotics of the esoteric and the hermetic. It's all on purpose. We've covered that in the last hour, but it is about apotheosis. You're right. It's about man overcoming the limitations of time and ultimately, I would say, death, but not through the means that we think, as you said, an exterior savior, but rather through, as we know in the Marvel universe, through transhumanism.
Yeah, and that's another thing. The themes of transhumanism, I think, are also, pretty, they're pretty well in throughout all the Marvel movies that we've seen. The idea of, some of the other esoteric gods, now, Doctor Strange, which of course is a metaphor for the Antichrist. Yet, once again, we have the Antichrist that is the just and divine sorcerer, the sorcerer supreme, who calls upon the powers of time and space and wormholes and all this stuff. I mean, it all comes together because that's all we've been seeing lately are shows that depict and use the same metaphors. Like I was talking about Stranger Things and how in Stranger Things we have the Demogorgon, which is, of course, another phrase for the demiurge, or the idea of war, the idea of the two-headed beasts of war that's supposed to come into the realms, the Upside Down, which is this area that's kind of like the darker realm that has been created by the Department of Energy, and the sorcery that they indicate. There's also a Ouija board of sorts that's being used to communicate with the boy that's on the other side. I mean, all these things, this esoteric Fortiana, I guess you'd call it, or something, is being now programmed into us to understand that these are the ways, apart from the rigidity of your Bible, that will take you and give you new enlightenment.
Yeah, in fact, I'm glad you mentioned Stranger Things. I was going to bring it up, the similarity you mentioned in your analysis of Doctor Strange. You mentioned the upside down and the twisting of dimensions and spatial dimensions and reversing things and going backwards. And that comes up in Crowleyanism or Satanism. And in Stranger Things, they refer to that ether or that dark side as the upside down. And when you go back and you watch Stranger Things, you see that it's nothing but a bunch of it's all sort of the same Kabbalistic message that you're talking about. That's exactly what I wrote in my analysis of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It certainly is. We're going to a few phone calls right now. 888-673-3700. We go to Sarah in Oregon. Hi, Sarah, on Ground Zero with Jay Dyer.
Oh, hello, Jay. Hello, Clyde.
Hi.
You just mentioned Crowley, Jay, and that's what I'm calling about. I'm not like a huge expert in thelema, although I know a lot about Crowley. And cakes of light in that context is they're kind of like honey cakes, and there's a special recipe that he lays out in Liber Al, the Book of the Law. And it has got honeys and oils and spices, and then he says the blood of a woman and the blood of a child. And he liked to play around a lot with such things. And what he meant basically was menstrual blood and semen.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody, and you probably know all this, Jay, if anybody is worried about, in general, people having blood sacrifices, like in thelema and other kinds of similar traditions, no, they're not. They do put a ritual amount of these substances in a big old bottle of cookie dough or a batch of cookie dough. Now, as for Podesta and what they invited him to, I have no idea. They could have very well perverted this and decided to sacrifice real people. I couldn't tell you. But that could be all they invited him to.
Yeah, well, he didn't go, from what I understand. In fact, I mean, I know that a lot of people jumped on it and said that he was a Satanist because he was invited, but, guilty by association. I mean, I associate with a lot of people who are,
right.
esoteric giants in my community, I guess, and others. Of course, Diabolus Rex, one of them, and several others who are considered to be heretics. The church
I know Rex. Rex is great. Well, okay, I know Podesta didn't go. They've said that. And, no, you wouldn't be guilty by association. I have been to a couple of educational thelema meetings. A friend invited me. They were doing things like giving classes on, tarot and some of Aleister Crowley's writings. And they invited me to their Mass, which is actually very similar in structure to a Catholic Mass, except that they say things that kind of...
In reverse.
In a friendly way, they repudiate Catholicism, if it's possible to do that in a friendly way.
Wow.
And
see.
They come up and they have a little thing they say when they eat the cake and stuff like that. And you don't have to eat it the first time, but they prefer that if you return, you do. And they make sure that you know exactly what's in it. You have to have full disclosure. That was what Crowley was into, and that's what they're into too, is full disclosure. So Crowley was not a Satanist, as you probably know, Jay. He had a lot of posturing and a lot of self-made mystery. He was a legend in his own mind, basically. As it happened, he turned out to be a legend in a lot of other people's minds as well. But he just wanted attention. The man wanted attention. He wanted people to think he was doing all these horrible, bad things. And I won't say that he never conjured up a demon or anything. At least he thought he did. But for the most part, this was probably harmless. Now, what the Illuminati gets up to in its own time, I don't know. Like I said, maybe they do blood sacrifices. Nobody could say. But it's certainly not Podesta's fault if he was invited. That is true. That is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I've been invited, if you want to put it that way.
Well, I've been invited, too. I've gone to a few esoteric gatherings because they want me to come speak about what I talk about, and it doesn't make me any more of a Satanist or an Illuminatist than anyone else. I've spoke at Masonic lodges before, too, and doesn't mean that I'm a Mason. So, I mean, I just think that we need to be careful about who and what. I mean, the rituals are there. That's one thing. The esoteric knowledge, the revelation, the method is being shown in Doctor Strange. That's another thing. It just means to me that the time is right for bringing this forward now. And as Jay and I had talked about, I think that Doctor Strange is more or less a metaphor for the Antichrist, which I think is interesting.
Now I really need to see this movie.
Yeah, it's a great film. It really is. It's really good. You learn a lot from it, Sarah. Thanks for the call. Yeah, I would say that, from what we're talking about, it may whet the appetite of people to go see this, because that way they can see how this is all playing out. And I think they do need to see it, because I'm sure that, not just the Antichrist is a running theme for some of these movies and the idea of transhumanism, but of course we're all going to be bombarded in the next couple months with a lot of alien films too. Mm-hmm. And they seem to go hand in hand. We'll be back with more Jay Dyer here on Ground Zero. 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. I'm Clyde Lewis. You're listening to Ground Zero, and we'll be back.
FM News 101 KXL.
Things that go bump in the night. Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis.
Jay Dyer with us tonight on Ground Zero. We go to Eric in Washington. Hi, Eric. You're on with Jay. Go ahead.
Hey, Jay. Hey, Clyde. I've been a long-time listener, but I just want to talk to you because it's weird that I watched this in the morning today, and then I just turned on the radio, and here you are talking about it. I want to talk about the Hinduism aspect of it because that's really what got into my head when I watched it. I don't know if you know the trinity of deities in Hinduism, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And Brahma is considered the creator, Vishnu is the sustainer, and Shiva is the destroyer. So now this movie depicts Shiva as this god that is trying to destroy reality. But in Hinduism, Brahma is the creator, and Brahma is not worshipped in Hinduism because of the fact that he creates things, he creates attachment, and Brahma's daughter represents nature, and Brahma goes after his daughter in an incestual way, and this is why, as humans go after nature and reality, as this is, considering that this is actually the end-all, be-all reality of this universe, so to speak. And so Vishnu is what people are trying to attain as yogis, is to be one with, the oneness of the universe. And so as this does portray, I feel like an aspect of Shiva, which tries to, in an evil, in an idea where it is considered evil, when it is not really, because you're trying to get, in Hinduism, you're trying to get off the cycle of, death and rebirth and to disconnect, to tell you the truth. And so that is really, I feel like, what is being portrayed here. But the good thing is that the mission of Hollywood you were talking about, it doesn't matter what interpretation is right or wrong, as long as it makes you think, because like Jay had said about Kali Yuga, in fact, because of the precession of the planets and the universe, Kali Yuga has ended, and the next Yuga, which is the Satya Yuga, has started, which is, which takes humans into a more intelligent, I guess, if you want to call it, plane of being. And this whole cycle in Hinduism, the solar system, when it goes closest to the center of the galaxy, is when the human consciousness is at its highest, at which point they say in Hinduism where, you don't even have to talk to people, you can just think it and they will get it, and at the end of, and then so it's going in an elliptical orbit, so to speak, where when you're closest, it's when your intellect is at the highest. So now, when Kali Yuga started, they say that Krishna, who was, they consider him a deity or so in Hinduism, said that, don't forget about teaching these guys, general wisdom. Teach them devotion, because the human intellect is going to be so bad when it goes through Kali Yuga. And now, as it comes out of it, you can see, computers and technology, and people start to think. It's the mentality of people. Of you get me?
You're saying we're passing. I mean, it's just like what Jay said about transhumanism. It's the passing of one idea to the other. Jay, it's the new Prometheanism. It's the idea of Promethean knowledge, right?
Absolutely. There's a really good essay by one of the perennialists, by a guy named Rama Kumaraswamy, and he has a great essay that ties in directly to what the caller's talking about, and it's about the monad, the dyad, and the triad. So it's very similar to Platonism. and he talks about kind of the Hindu version of the Trinity. But I would also recommend the essay in response that kind of, I think, critiques it. And that's by Dr. Philip Sherrard, where he talks, it's called Tradition and the Traditions. So these are two good essays that you could find, Philip Sherrard and Ramakumar Swami, on these things.
Oh, amazing. And another thing is I've been a Buddhist all my life, and the Buddha is really a manifestation. He's a real, he's just a regular human being, in his day, but he is a manifestation of intellect and wisdom. And really after Buddhism took hold of the world is really when Hinduism started thriving, because the intellect of human beings started started getting better. And another thing is that humans think that they're entitled in a sense to we can think, and so we are end all be all.
We are seeing the gradualing. I think it's like the folding of this type of philosophy, folding it into Christianity, folding it into the other religions, the main religions that are fighting in wars, and they're adding these things together. And it's, as I said, there seems to be a spiritual poverty that exists where people are finding Eastern philosophies and science fiction more inviting and more satisfying in a way. And that's why shows like,
these are very powerful and dangerous ideas. These are very powerful and dangerous ideas.
I don't sympathize. Forget everything that you think you know.
When the Judeo-Christian consolidation of Western spirituality became the enforced model, magic was really moved way off to the sidelines.
You're a man looking at the world through a keyhole. You've spent your life trying to widen it. Your work saved the lives of thousands. What if I told you that reality is one of many?
Alchemy comes to us through a craft tradition.
I don't believe in fairy tales about chakras or energy or the power of belief.
You wonder what I see in your future? Possibility.
People in the craft tradition have ways of maintaining the secrecy of their skills, secrecy of their knowledge.
Why are you doing this?
There are other ways to save lives. So much you don't know.
World of esoteric knowledge where science and religion come together to form an ecumenical stronghold. This is a warning. In 2002, the International Journal of Psychoanalysis featured an essay about predictive programming in the 1999 movie Fight Club. The shocking revelation of the method in the film prompted author Gene Wolfe Bernstein to point out that a terrorist organization led by Tyler Durden blew up buildings along the New York skyline. The last to fall actually were the Twin Towers. She said in her essay that when reality imitates cinematic fiction, cinema no longer functions as a prosthesis for memory, but as an intact body for what is to come in the future. Rather than just preserving history, the film instead furnishes a syntax and lens through which reality is being force-structured. Jay, it's interesting that, of course, in the movie Fight Club, we see the towers come down. Several films and TV shows depict the towers going down. What is it that Doctor Strange is going to deliver? What kind of revelation of method, in your opinion, is it delivering to the people now?
The new Aeon. I know that's probably been talked about before, but as I said earlier, the idea of the Sorcerer Supreme, the role is given to Doctor Strange. He takes on that role. And this is the idea of the Western man, exemplified by him that you're talking about, whose atheism and scientism and materialism are lacking the spiritualism of the East, at least as the narrative goes, right? And this is intended to converge, and this is the whole plan of the CFR's convergence all the way back to the 60s and 70s that Dr. Carol Quigley wrote about, the idea of blending the East and the West, the worst aspects of communism in the East and monopoly capitalism in the West into the new system, and then all of it goes together, right? And we see the same bankers, of course, behind all of it, including the ecumenical movement. So that's what the New Age is about. That's what Doctor Strange represents.
It was also the symbolism I thought was fascinating. Doctor Strange, of course, I look at it as an updated matrix with magicians and sorcerers able to bend time and use sacred geometry throughout the film. I was noticing that when the fire flies from their fingers and they have, I don't know what to call them, they use talisman as their weapons, and you see these geometric talismans. I was thinking that they are combination keys that mixed with numeric significance. They have the 6 cube 216, the Solomon's key, the Oracle seeing eye of the future. You've got the eye that he wears. And so you're looking at numeric combinations that were significant in Solomon's keys, where you have the 216 number, the 666 number, the hexagonal shapes, the tetragrammatron. All of these things are seen in the film. Would you say that they have power just by seeing them if people don't understand what they are? Because I would say that when I saw them, I knew exactly what I was seeing. But to an audience that's not educated in the esoteric arts or knowing any of it, does it still affect them in a way, in a subconscious level, do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, we covered this in that last time I was on. We were talking about meme magic, and it's that same principle that these things are, in a sense, innate in us, even if we're not consciously aware of them. And that's where I would differ, with the Enlightenment philosophy that we're blank slates. Plato, I think, was a little closer to reality, closer to the truth in that regard, in that he saw man created as a mirror, a little tiny mirror, a microcosm of the macrocosm. And so within man is his own little world. And it's not a blank slate. It already contains, in a sense, the what are called the logoi, or the archetypal principles that are intended to lead man to God, ultimately, I would say. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, in that regard, even if a person is not consciously aware of what the meaning of all these esoteric symbols, it's still stored away. And I think science has even shown that, from our earliest days when we're children, even though we may not remember it, our brain was still storing things away, right? Even when we were maybe 2, 3, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's all still recorded somewhere and stuck in our synapses somewhere, right, in our brain. And I think as we learn, as we grow, we have this process of remembrance where we come to understand and hopefully, right, we grow to grasp in some faint sense through a mirror darkly what these archetypal forms and symbols mean. I think Pythagoras and Plato were onto a lot of truths in that regard.
Well, I would say that I believe that deep down in our collective unconscious is this spirit of the second incarnation, viewing the second incarnation of a divine being. And we're looking at a vicar of Christ or an antichrist. And I don't think this is an accident in these times because it's so overwhelming that, people are seeing the devil peeking behind every corner, and prophecy is approximating the time of the arrival of the incarnation of Baal. We had the arches erected. Remember, we're talking about the meme science, the meme of the arches of Baal and what they may mean, and the needle of Cleopatra and what they might mean, and that all of this stuff, that we're looking at symbols, and we're looking at simulations, and we're looking at metaphors that all point to an idea of a charismatic leader that has that power to, have fire come down from heaven and to be able to conquer and fight off what would appear to be demons. They probably simulated demons or something else. It just seems to me that they are prepping us for this in a lot of ways. I mean, there's Lucifer, the TV show. There's Doctor Strange. There's I can go down the list of all these archetypes that could be considered the dark archetypes. The idea of even Star Wars. The Force arises or the Force awakens. It's not the force that we're familiar with. It's the force of the death of the First Order. It's the idea that Kylo Ren is taking up the reins from where his grandfather left off and wearing the mask of doom and going out and killing more than just one planet but entire universes.
Well, if you remember the character in the film, the Ancient One, we're told that we're supposed to think she's the good guy. But in the film, she's been cheating, she's been lying and sapping off of the power of the dark side to prolong her life. And so there's a pragmatism, there's a kind of Machiavellian, ends justify the means situation going on. And I think that's what you're getting at. That's different. So like when if you take Jesus as an analogy, he's tempted out in the desert, and he resists the devil's temptations. And I think that the inverse of this would be, the dark hero, the anti-hero, right? He actually experiences, so the mythology of the Antichrist goes, right? He experiences both dark and light, and therefore he's supposed to be in some way superior.
Well, it's like the monomythical hero that Joseph Campbell talks about, the monomythical hero that comes from the Dark Father. We do not know of his origins. We don't know of his father. We don't know who his father is, but we have to write it off as some dark father figure. Like, Barack Obama is kind of like a monomythical hero in a sense, because we don't know the origins of his father. We don't know of his loyalties. We don't know a lot about him, but they make him the monomythical hero. The same with Anakin Skywalker. Nobody knew who his father was. He just had the right bloodline, which is kind of weird that they did that. He had to have the right bloodline in order to bring balance to the Force, when the balance of the Force was literally bringing the duality of evil into the mix, and then having him be the prodigal son and coming back and saying, okay, he's going to save the galaxy from all the darkness. So a little bad isn't always a bad thing. It's kind of a good thing to bring tension and possible lessons learned from duality. But I don't think people understand that concept.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying that I would say it's a good thing, but I'm saying that in that from that perspective, that's what they're trying to say. For example, Carl Jung has an essay on Antichrist where he says that very thing, that Antichrist is precisely the duality of both good and evil in a single person. And so that is contrasted, obviously, with the person of Christ. So that, I think, is the perspective that is being presented in the character of either Tilda Swinton's character, Ancient One, or Doctor Strange.
Because that's always been, I guess it's always been this overused metaphor in a lot of stories. And I think it was Philip K. Dick was the author that brought us to the idea of the Dark Father, or the idea of the Iron Cage, where we find out in the end that God was the devil all along, and that we have been fighting him for so long, and that in the end we have ourselves to only fall back on our choices. That, we ourselves are responsible for the good in us, that we had it put in us from the beginning, and that the devil was always there to make us screw up.
Well, that sheds a new light on interpreting Descartes' evil demon scenario, because that would mean that Descartes' whole idea that, well, how do we know that we're not dreaming, and that this whole reality that we're in isn't being foisted upon us by an evil demon. Now, it's supposed to be a philosophical exercise in thinking, but we know that Descartes was actually involved in some aspects of Hermeticism. So maybe Descartes was actually saying that he thought that the creator of this world was some kind of demon.
Which all goes back to Gnosis again, right? It goes back to the idea that, the demiurge is the crazy god that formed this planet, and that, we have the the archons and Sophia and all this other. I mean, all of this esoteric knowledge, I don't see anything wrong with knowing of it. And I think that that's where a lot of my Christian audience disagrees with me, that, you know, I don't consider myself a bad Christian or necessarily a good Christian. I consider myself a Christian that wants to know more. And what the Bible doesn't tell me, a lot of the esoteric writings have told me. A lot of the Sumerian texts have told me. A lot of the other scrolls have told me. And I think that knowledge is important.
I do too, certainly. I mean, in fact, a lot of the church fathers would say that they were true Gnostics, right? Even though they were writing against the literal Gnostics. They would say that they were the true Gnostics, like St. Clement of Alexandria, for example, who had a very mystical approach to theology, or say Maximus the Confessor, who wrote on the cosmic mystery of the Logos. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, those are approaches that one could take that I would say are much better than what you would find in, you know, a lot of the so-called Bible churches.
Jay Dyer with us tonight on Ground Zero, 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. More to come. Don't go away.
FM News 101 KXL.
Would odors, mold, and mildew describe your basement or crawl space? It doesn't have to be that way. Transform them into a fresh, healthy, usable one with the technologically advanced Wave Moisture Control Units. The computerized operation maximizes moisture control and also expels harmful radon, combustion gases, and numerous other pollutants. Dehumidifiers are old technology that do nothing for air quality and waste energy. Wave units are intelligent, self-monitoring, do not need maintenance, and will save you hundreds in electricity. Wave units are still running effectively over 15 years. They've been tested and installed in public and military housing and by property managers nationwide. Buy a unit now, and if your home is not fresher and drier, you can return it for a full refund for up to 12 months. What have you got to lose? Call now. 1-888-618-WAVE. 1-888-618-WAVE. Or visit mydryhome.com. That's mydryhome.com.
Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
You're listening to Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis on FM News
101. Jay Dyer with us tonight on Ground Zero. We go down to Robert in Ohio. Hi, Robert. Go ahead. You're on with Jay Dyer.
Hey, how you doing, man? I was listening to your comment, and I never called in, but just first-time caller, long-time listener. But your thirst for knowledge, you got to be careful with that, in my opinion, because knowledge can lead you down a wrong path. It can have you so thirsty, looking for something exciting, that it can take you off in another tangent to where you tapped into something that's exciting, but it's actually, you may have tapped into something that is a cursed thing. So thirst for knowledge and thirst for truth, you gotta examine that every step of the way. So truth doesn't change. And truth, you know, being a Christian, your truth is based in the Word of God.
No, what I've learned for some Christians is that truth for them is rigidity. And I think rigidity leads to the path of the dark side, in my opinion. I believe that you can know and get knowledge and have the idea of every type of belief system or whatever belief systems are, whether it be Eastern philosophies or other philosophies, but you don't have to necessarily delve in and be a part of them, but you can have a knowledge of them without worrying about whether or not you're going to get condemned to hell by the devil. And I think so many people make the excuse of rigidity instead of the idea of open-mindedness. What do you think, Jay?
Well, here's okay. Now that's a very
wait a minute. Jay, what's your opinion on that?
I agree. I've studied all the religions, you know, for a long time, and you know, they've not really, I don't feel like, influenced my opinions towards anything devilish. In fact, I would say that if you can't examine other positions, then you're really holding to your position out of fear. So knowledge for itself, yeah, I would agree that that's not necessarily virtuous per se, but if you want to know what's true and you're seeking knowledge, then doesn't it, in other words, for example, how do you know which Christian tradition to choose if you don't examine the different traditions? Do you just assume that the one that you're in is correct? Well, how do you know?
Well, the way that I knew, and the answer to this question is, what kind of separated me off that path of just everything is okay because it's under the cloud of Christianity. What separated me was an experience with God. The experience separated me. It was like I awoke. It's like I awoke, and when I awoke to the experience, and the experience I could not deny, and the experience was so life-changing and pure and good and satisfying that I knew that without this experience I wouldn't have woken up.
Well, I mean, and some people will say to you that whatever your experience was is good for you, and if it gave you a warm feeling and a good feeling, that's good and that's important. I would say, though, that, sometimes experiences are so amazing that you want to know more about them, like a paranormal or supernatural experience. That's what drives me, is I've had a few in my life that I want to explore. Jay, thank you so much for being on the program tonight. Where can we find more about you and some of your books and things you're doing?
Yeah, well, so if you like the type of analysis that we did tonight, my book is shipping out in the next week or two, and it's called Esoteric Hollywood Sex, Cults, and Symbols in Film, and it's not a scandal book. It's an in-depth analysis of film, precisely like we've been doing, all the esoteric stuff, all the philosophical, all the geopolitical, in, I think, a very readable way, right? So you can give this to your friends and family for, as a way to wake them up. If they don't really care about politics or anything like that, you can still wake them up with movies. Yes. Because the film is full of all this stuff. So you can find that at jaysanalysis.com.
jaysanalysis.com.